Eli and Emma vanished from their quiet street without a sound. For decades, their mother June lived with unanswered questions, whispers of blame, and a house frozen in time. 30 years later, while cleaning her attic, she found a forgotten photo album, and in the background of her children's smiling faces was a shadow she instantly recognized. Another photo confirmed it. Someone had been watching her twins long before they disappeared. What June uncovered didn't just reopen the case, it revealed a betrayal closer than anyone dared imagine. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. In the summer of 1981, the Hartley family lived on a quiet street lined with cracked sidewalks and elm trees that leaned like watchmen over the yards. Their world was small, simple, ordinary. Yet at its heart were the twins, Eli and Emma, two children so alike in appearance that even their mother sometimes caught herself staring twice. They weren't just siblings, they were reflections. Eli with his restless hands, always tapping rhythms on tabletops. Emma with her watchful eyes that caught every detail others missed. They shared secrets no one else could decode, inventing their own shorthand, laughing at jokes no one else understood. Their mother, June, often smiled at their closeness, though sometimes it frightened her. "It's like they're half of one whole," she whispered once to a neighbor, brushing flour off her apron. That August, the days hung heavy and gold. Windows were open, cicadas hummed, and June called the children in from the yard every evening as street lamps buzzed to life. But one night, her voice trailed unanswered. The screen door creaked, she stepped onto the porch, and the yard was empty. No thump of sneakers, no twin giggles echoing from behind the hedge. Just silence. June's heart raced as she checked the neighbor's yard, the swings at the park down the block, the corner store where they sometimes sneaked penny candy. Nothing. By the time she returned, her hands shaking on the doorframe, the sun had slipped and the streetlights flickered. When she called the police, they arrived with stiff faces and clipboards. "Kids wander," one officer muttered, scribbling notes as if this were routine. But June knew. This wasn't mischief. This was wrong. She clutched Eli's baseball cap she'd found tossed carelessly on the lawn, and the air around her felt thick, heavy, like the whole night had tilted. Word spread fast. Neighbors gathered on porches, muttering under their breath. "Twins like that don't just vanish." Someone whispered, "Maybe they ran off. Maybe June wasn't watching." Each comment pierced deeper, but June ignored them, standing in the street, scanning the shadows, calling their names until her voice cracked. By midnight, searchlights cut through the elm branches. Officers fanned out. Dogs barked. Flashlights swept ditches and fences. But the neighborhood remained still, stubborn. The twins had melted into it, like drops of water into the soil. And by dawn, nothing had changed. Beds untouched, pajamas folded, 2 toothbrushes dry. The Hartley house no longer hummed with laughter. Only silence and the sharp, rising edge of fear. By sunrise, the street was a corridor of sirens and shoe prints. Officers marked grids on notepads, volunteers taped fresh flyers to light poles, and a low murmur rolled from porch to porch, names, times, guesses, blame. June stood at the curb, arms wrapped around herself so tight her fingers went white. Every few minutes she smoothed the wrinkle in her dress, a small, nervous loop, then checked the yard again as if the twins might simply fade back into view. The neighborhood gave up its secrets slowly. Hedges parted, sheds opened, crawl spaces breathed out cool, dusty air. Search dogs nosed along fence lines, paws silent on dew-soaked grass. The handlers traded glances. No trail. The dogs kept circling, whining at the street like scent had been scrubbed away. A detective frowned and jotted something, pen clicking too fast. By afternoon, the park was a swarm. Rakes combing mulch, hands patting tall grass, the metallic clink of a chain-link fence shivering as people leaned and called. Someone found a marble near the sandbox. It wasn't theirs. A red ribbon snagged in a bush, also not theirs. Every not theirs tightened the knot in June's chest. Inside the house, officers moved carefully, but their caution still felt loud. A camera flashed in the twins' room, catching 2 neatly made beds, a shelf of plastic animals, a jar of pressed leaves labeled in Emma's careful hand. The flash lit dust in the air like snowfall. June's breath hitched. She straightened a pillow that didn't need straightening, then straightened it again. By dusk, the whispers sharpened. Maybe they wandered toward the creek. Maybe someone in a car. Someone always says car. At the corner, 2 women angled their backs to June and murmured, "She works late, right?" The other shrugged. Kids don't just vanish. Somebody wasn't watching. The words slid under June's skin like ice. She stared past them, jaw set, counting the porch boards to keep from breaking. Night brought floodlights and coffee. The search grid widened street by street, then out to the rail yard, then to the edge of the woods where the town thinned into fields. The ground there smelled like wet iron and cut hay. Volunteers called until their voices rasped. The only answer was the clack of insects and the soft slap of a tarp at the command post. A lead popped, then dissolved. An old pickup seen near the park. A boy on a bike saying he heard laughter by the elm. Each thread frayed as fast as it was tied. The detective with the quick pen stopped clicking it. He pressed the cap on and stared at the map like it had lied to him. At midnight, the sheriff told June to rest. She nodded, didn't move. Her hands flattened a flyer on the hood of a cruiser, Eli and Emma's school photos side by side, 2 smiles nearly identical, except for the tilt of Emma's head. June traced that tilt with her thumb. When the street finally dimmed, the house felt different. Too clean, too arranged, the air holding the twins' absence like a shape. In the kitchen, June set 2 glasses of water and didn't drink from either. By morning, the posters had started to curl at the corners. The rumor mill had found its rhythm, and the official theory, whatever it was, had already begun to slip from certainty into fog. The town would keep searching, but the tide had turned, quietly, toward suspicion. And it was the mother standing in that tide, alone. Seasons turned into a slow grind of sameness, each year another coat of paint on the same unanswered question. The flyers faded, peeled away from poles, replaced by garage sale notices and high school football schedules. But inside the Hartley house, time froze. June never touched the twins' room. The bed stayed made. The pressed leaves still lined the shelf, dust gathering in quiet layers like unspoken years. She washed their sheets once a month, ironed them, folded them, then remade the beds with trembling hands. Neighbors muttered, "She's keeping a shrine." Another added in a hushed voice at the market, "It's not healthy." June heard them sometimes, pushing her cart past, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. The police declared the case cold within 3 years. The files, labeled Hartley twins, sat in a cabinet no one opened. When June called the station, she got polite tones that cut her off at the knees. "No new leads, ma'am," one deputy even whispered to another. "She calls every month like clockwork." Unaware, June stood in the hall and heard every word. But June didn't stop. She filled notebooks with dates, sightings, dreams even. She clipped articles about children missing in other towns, highlighting passages until her fingers smudged with yellow. Every night, she sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp on, tracing patterns no one else cared to see. Gossip thickened. At church, whispers rustled through pews. "She's obsessed. She can't move on." Others claimed she knew more than she let on. One woman told her husband while pouring coffee, "What if she's hiding something?" Twins don't just vanish. The husband only shook his head and said, "Let her be." She's grieving. By the 10th year, people stopped bringing casseroles, stopped asking. When she walked into town square, conversations dipped, then rose again, like waves around a rock. Still, she kept her head high, though inside, the weight pressed her smaller each day. The years wore different faces on her. Wrinkles deepened, hair streaked with gray, hands slower. But her eyes, those never dulled. They stayed sharp, scanning, catching small details others let slip. A scrap of fabric snagged on a fence near the woods. Shoe prints too small for a man, too wide for a child's. A laugh in the night air that froze her mid-step because, for a second, just a second, it was Emma's. She began walking the edges of town at dusk, when shadows lengthened. Some evenings she carried a flashlight, sweeping it along fences, creek banks, hollow tree stumps. She told herself she was just checking, but really, she couldn't sleep without it. 30 years is a long time. Friends grew old. Neighbors died or moved away. The town changed its face. But June stayed tethered to that single night in 1981, orbiting the same absence. And in that orbit, she found patterns no one else cared to notice. Because the truth, whatever it was, hadn't gone anywhere. It was still here, waiting. It was the 30th summer since the twins had vanished. June moved slower now, her steps careful, her hair pulled back in a silver knot. Most people assumed she had finally quieted her search, but inside, the fire hadn't dimmed, it had only smoldered deeper. One humid afternoon, while cleaning boxes in the attic, she found something strange wedged between the rafters. An old photo album, the leather cover cracked with age. She almost set it aside, thinking it was just another forgotten keepsake. But when she opened it, her breath caught. Inside were snapshots from neighborhood barbecues, church events, birthdays. But then, midway through, her hands froze. A picture of the twins, Eli and Emma, grinning in the front yard on that very week they disappeared. They wore matching striped shirts. But behind them, in the blurred background, stood a shadow of a figure. Not a neighbor, not family. Someone watching from the sidewalk, half turned, caught mid-step. June's stomach clenched. She pressed the photo closer. The figure's face was indistinct, but the posture, the set of the shoulders, felt familiar. Her pulse pounded as she turned to the next photo. This time, only Emma, smiling at the camera, and again, that same figure, faint but present near the hedges. June dropped the album, pages fanning across the floor. Her knees buckled, and she sat hard, clutching the frame of the attic door. The discovery was small, barely more than a blur, but to her it was undeniable. Someone had been there, watching, close enough to step inside their lives. That night she couldn't sleep. She replayed those images in her head, overlaying them with memories, whispers, and all the unanswered questions. For 30 years she had begged for proof, and here, in a forgotten box of photographs, she had it. Not answers, not closure, but proof of intrusion. It shattered her world because it meant the twins hadn't simply wandered off into the night. They had been taken, watched, targeted, and suddenly, the silence of those decades felt even heavier. Someone had kept this secret buried, and June had just unearthed the first crack. June carried that photo album like it was glass. For weeks, she studied the blurred figure in the background, tracing the outline of the shoulders, the faint shape of a cap, the slant of a stance that haunted her memory. At first, she thought it was imagination, a desperate mind forcing patterns. But the more she looked, the more certain she became. She knew that posture. It wasn't a stranger at all. It was someone from their street. The thought cracked her like thunder. For 30 years she had stared outward, at the woods, at the rail yards, at the creek beds. All the while, the shadow had stood closer than she dared believe. She began retracing old paths, visiting neighbors who were now grandparents or gone. In one cluttered garage, she found another photograph stuck in a drawer, the twins at a school fair, balloons tied to their wrists. And again, at the very edge, the same blurred figure. Watching. Always watching. June's hands trembled as she carried it home. That night, she laid the two photographs side by side on her kitchen table, her lamp flickering in the stillness. Her chest felt hollow. Someone had stalked her children. Not once, but over and over. The revelation didn't bring peace. It burned. Because if the figure was who she feared, then someone she once trusted had known the truth all along. The next morning, she walked into town with the photos. People turned as she passed. Some curious, some pitying, some whispering. At the sheriff's office, the young deputy barely looked up when she placed the pictures on the counter. But when his eyes landed on the faint figure in the background, his face paled. He swallowed, stiffened, then muttered, "We'll reopen the file." But June saw it. The hesitation, the flicker in his gaze. They had always known, maybe not the full story, maybe not every detail, but enough to close the case quietly and leave her drowning in silence. The truth she uncovered shattered her, not because it solved everything, but because it confirmed her darkest suspicion. Her twins hadn't been lost to chance, to wandering, or to fate. They had been taken, right under the town's nose, under the watch of people she'd once greeted with a smile. 30 years of hope collapsed into a hollow certainty. She clutched the photos to her chest and whispered their names, her voice shaking the silence of the kitchen walls. And though the truth had finally surfaced, it left her with something colder than not knowing. Because the face in the background, the one that had stolen her children, belonged to someone she could never confront again. Time had buried him, but the wound he left remained raw, festering through generations. The twins were gone, and the mother was left to carry not just the grief, but the weight of a truth so horrific it would never let her rest. The case was no longer mystery. It was betrayal, and that betrayal would haunt the town forever. The photographs shattered 30 years of silence, proving Eli and Emma hadn't simply wandered into the night. They were taken, and the truth had always been closer than anyone admitted. Some secrets can stay hidden for decades, but when they finally surface, they cut deeper than the lie itself. If stories of haunting disappearances, shocking discoveries, and chilling truths grip you as much as this one, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because the next story might be even darker, and it might be closer than you think.